What if the headlines flashing across our screens, the brutal fighting in Donbass, shadowy decisions in Paris, sudden American attention to Central Asia, and explosive lawsuits in Washington, are not separate stories, but coordinated moves in a high-stakes contest that could reshape the world order? Right now, a massive Russian surge on the Donetsk front is tearing up the old rules of war in Eastern Europe. Russian assault teams push relentlessly into urban strongholds, igniting a lethal phase of block-by-block combat. In Donbass, every neighborhood, every residential building, transforms into a fortress, while the region itself teeters on the edge of collapse. As Donetsk burns, intelligence out of Paris points to an even more dangerous escalation. French President Emmanuel Macron is secretly preparing a military force, ready to deploy troops on Ukrainian soil. This move, masked in secrecy, risks the unimaginable, French and Russian soldiers facing each other, with NATO itself poised to be drawn into the flames. While Europe holds its breath, Washington is making its own daring play. Donald Trump is convening a historic summit with Central Asian leaders, openly challenging Moscow's decades-old dominance in the region. This calculated gamble could unravel traditional alliances, undercutting Russian influence and opening a new front in the contest for global power. At the same moment, the information war is reaching white-hot intensity. The Russian Direct Investment Fund is suing the Washington Post in American courts, escalating the battle for narrative control between East and West. This is no ordinary lawsuit. It signals that the struggle for influence now extends to the world's most powerful legal arenas. Any one of these flashpoints could tip the balance of global power. But together, they are merging into a perfect storm, a web of military, diplomatic, and information warfare that could upend everything from national security to the fate of world markets. Miss the connections, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Shattered security, trillions lost, and the nightmare of nuclear powers stumbling into direct conflict. It is time to pull back the curtain and trace how each front feeds a single, high-stakes game for the future. The bloodiest chapter may be unfolding right now on the streets of Donetsk. Each crisis is a warning flare, but together they form a pattern that demands urgent attention. Let us unravel how these seemingly distant events are colliding and what it means for the balance of power in the 21st century. Within a single day, the Donbass battlefield has plunged into its most lethal phase yet: urban warfare, where every street corner becomes a deadly front line. Russian forces have shattered several fortified Ukrainian lines, surging deep into the embattled east. Now, Moscow's assault groups have breached the strategic cities of Mirnograd and Konstantinovka, urban bastions whose fate may decide the region's destiny. The conflict has shifted from open fields to a maze of city blocks. House-to-house combat erupts as civilians, trapped within residential districts, scramble for survival while artillery shells thunder overhead. Vast industrial complexes, once alive with workers, have become makeshift fortresses, both armies entrenching themselves for a close-quarters siege. Ukraine understands exactly what hangs in the balance. Reinforcements and engineering units are being rushed to fortify the city centers. What used to be a distant battle of attrition has now become intimate and brutal. Russian troops advance with armored vehicles and motorized infantry, determined to uproot defenders one block at a time. Military analysts warn that if Mirnograd and Konstantinovka fall, Russia will gain a clear corridor into the Ukrainian heartland, putting the entire eastern defense at risk. The collapse of these cities could spark a domino effect, threatening not only the front, but the survival of entire regions. This crisis is more than a military turning point. It is a humanitarian disaster unfolding moment by moment. The lives of tens of thousands of civilians hang by a thread. Both sides know that control of these urban strongholds will decide far more than territory. It could dictate the next act of the war itself. As plumes of smoke rise over Donetsk and the world holds its breath, the stakes could not be higher, for military strategy, for civilian safety, and for the future of the conflict. Yet, just as the world's eyes lock onto Donbass, another front is quietly emerging in the heart of Europe, one that may prove even more perilous, with consequences poised to reverberate far beyond the battlefield. Unseen by most, secret maneuvers are already underway in Western capitals, moves that threaten to redraw the map of the conflict. In France, covert military preparations are accelerating, setting off alarm bells across the continent. As the world watches the flames in Ukraine, another fire is being kindled far from the headlines. In the marble halls of Paris, a plan is quietly coming to life, one with the power to ignite all of Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron is said to have authorized the blueprint for a covert deployment. Up to 2,000 French soldiers could soon be on Ukrainian soil, but they will not arrive as a traditional army. Instead, they would operate in shadows, fragmented into small, deniable teams, officially labeled as instructors and technical advisors, not combatants. The mission: to offer military aid without appearing to cross the line into open war. At the heart of this gamble stands the French Foreign Legion. This storied force is no stranger to clandestine warfare. Crucially, many legionnaires come from Eastern European and Slavic backgrounds. Their presence would give France plausible deniability, obscure its footprint, and limit French casualties if disaster strikes. For Paris, it is a chance to act boldly while containing domestic and international blowback. But Moscow is not deceived. Russian military analysts have already sounded the alarm. Any French force, no matter the insignia, explanation, or assignment, will be treated as an enemy. The Kremlin has made it clear that these so-called advisors would instantly become legitimate targets for Russian forces. Militarily, 2,000 elite troops would hardly tip the scales in Ukraine. Yet the political stakes are staggering. A single missile strike or ambush against a French unit could trigger a chain reaction, thrusting France and Russia into direct conflict. Under NATO's defense pact, such a flashpoint could drag the entire alliance, Europe and North America, toward the precipice of war. Now, the world teeters on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one misread signal, and the conflict could erupt into a catastrophe with repercussions far beyond Europe. But France is not the only actor raising the stakes. Across the globe, the United States is maneuvering in Central Asia, preparing its own countermeasures. Thousands of miles from the battered fields of Donbass, a quieter but equally momentous front is opening. In the heart of Eurasia, Washington orchestrates a bold diplomatic play that could upend the balance of power across continents. Behind closed doors, former President Donald Trump prepares to host an unprecedented summit. All 5 Central Asian leaders, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, will gather for talks never before attempted at this level. The stakes are monumental. This single act threatens to shatter Russia's decades-old grip on the region and reverberate through Moscow's traditional sphere of influence. Central Asia's economies remain tightly knotted to Russia. Millions of migrant workers from these nations send vital remittances home from Russian cities, propping up both families and national budgets. Yet, deep economic ties have never translated into unwavering political loyalty. Sensing a crack in the facade, Washington moves swiftly. American envoys quietly dangle promises, new trade corridors, injections of investment, and the keys to global markets. There is talk of massive infrastructure projects and, crucially, of unlocking Central Asia's immense reserves of energy and strategic minerals. The United States aims to draw these nations away from Moscow, severing Russia's economic arteries and logistical routes. Beneath these overtures lies a razor-edged agenda. Washington is determined to seal the backdoor channels that have enabled Western technology to seep into Russia, bypassing layers of international sanctions. Should these loopholes close, Russia's capacity to sustain both its war machine and its broader economy would suffer a decisive blow. If this diplomatic gamble succeeds, the consequences will be seismic. Moscow's resilience could unravel, its access to critical resources shrinking, and Eurasia's balance of power tilting from the Baltics to the Himalayas. Yet the risks are immense. A realignment in Central Asia could shatter old alliances, disrupt vital energy flows, and ignite fresh proxy conflicts along Russia's vulnerable southern border. And even as leaders plot and counterplot, the true battle may be shifting into a new arena, one where narratives, perceptions, and public sentiment may prove just as decisive as any diplomatic maneuver. As the diplomatic chessboard shifts, another front intensifies. The information war is poised to erupt, shaping hearts and minds far beyond Eurasia. The contest for public opinion becomes a battleground with stakes no less grave than those in the halls of power. Beyond tanks and treaties, a subtler war is underway. A conflict waged not with bullets, but with headlines and hashtags. In this new arena, reputations and realities are forged and shattered at the speed of a trending topic. Consider the lawsuit brought by the head of the Russian Direct Investment Fund against the Washington Post, accusing the media giant of distorting facts and inflicting lasting reputational damage. This is far from an isolated incident. Such legal battles are multiplying as information itself becomes as potent and perilous as missiles or sanctions. Even former President Donald Trump has unleashed sweeping defamation claims against leading U.S. newspapers, alleging orchestrated attacks on his image and legacy. Yet the courtroom is only one theater. Worldwide, weaponized narratives, state-funded disinformation, and viral rumors threaten far more than individual names. They erode public trust, undermine alliances, and can destabilize entire regions. One misleading headline or a doctored video can ripple through millions of minds in minutes, shaking the foundations of diplomacy and security. The boundary between a free press and information warfare has never been more dangerously blurred. Now justice systems are turning into new battlegrounds, where truth itself is on trial. Corporations, governments, and ordinary people can awaken to find their names and fortunes destroyed by a viral story or a calculated smear campaign. The stakes are immense. Reputations, billions in investment, and the hopes for peace hang in the balance, all threatened by the weaponization of information. Deals collapse. Partnerships unravel. A single misjudgment can spiral into a crisis with real-world consequences, all sparked by digital battles fought in the shadows. And as the information war intensifies, the lines between diplomacy, security, and survival grow ever more blurred. The next move could decide not just narratives, but the fate of entire nations. In a world where every headline is a lever in a global contest, your understanding is your strongest defense. What unfolds before us is not a string of isolated crises, but a single, gathering storm. When military shifts in Donbass intersect with France's covert deployments and the United States maneuvers in Central Asia, the entire game changes for nations, economies, and ordinary lives. The information war is no background noise. Every lawsuit, every breaking story, every narrative twist is a calculated move in the struggle for influence and legitimacy. Here, reputations rise or collapse, public opinion is swayed, and alliances are tested or fractured. If you fail to see the connections, you risk being outplayed, whether as a citizen, a policymaker, or simply someone protecting your future. Billions of dollars, national security, and the risk of direct clash between nuclear powers now hang in the balance. Vigilance is no longer optional. It is essential. Your awareness, your willingness to question, to probe deeper, to map the patterns, is the shield against manipulation and deception. No government or institution can guarantee you clarity. In these times, you must be your own first responder in the search for truth. Every front, military, diplomatic, informational, is part of a broader contest shaping a new global order. Do not let headlines wash over you. Instead, interrogate them. Ask what is left unsaid, who stands to gain, and how today's moves shape tomorrow's reality. We have seen how close the world edges to chaos. The next move is not just for world leaders, but for all of us who choose to stay informed, alert, and connected.